Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and you are checking out a brand new updated guide on every single race for the Elder Scrolls Online now in 2021. In case you missed my patch note reviews, many ESO races are actually changing their passive bonuses for this next update, and your current race selection may no longer be the best in slot option for your build. So in this guide, we will take a look at each race and what has changed, and then look at some of your best options for DPS, tanks, healers, and even solo builds in the Elder Scrolls Online. So let's get started. Let's start with the races of the Aldmeri Dominion first, which are High Elf, Wood Elf, and Khajiit. Starting first with High Elf, some interesting changes here actually. The new description for High Elves now reads, "The racial skills of High Elves reflect their magical affinity by increasing their weapon and spell damage, resource recovery, base magicka, and experience gain. These innate bonuses help define the race as proud and powerful spellcasters." So one pretty interesting update there that sticks out to me is the increased weapon damage. Let's see how that looks in terms of the passives now. The Highborn passive is essentially the same still. This is like your flavor passive basically for the race. So High Elves have increased experience gain with Destruction Staff, and then you also increase your experience gain by 1%. That hasn't changed. Spell Recharge is the same as well. This is a very good sustain passive. Basically, when you activate an ability, you restore either 625 magicka or stamina, based on whichever is the lowest, and there's a 6-second cooldown. Also, when using an ability that is a channel or a cast time, you take 5% less damage. So this is a very good passive, both for sustain and damage reduction. Surbane's Boon is the same as well. This increases High Elf's max magicka by 2,000. But when we look at what's changed, Elemental Talent did get something added to it. That's the weapon damage that we talked about before. So increases your weapon and spell damage by 258. So I like that nothing was taken away from High Elves. All they got was extra weapon damage, which is actually going to be nice if you like playing hybrid builds, or if you just have a High Elf that you want to try a stamina build on. Now you'll get a little extra damage. Moving on to Wood Elves next, some interesting changes here as well. The new description reads, "The Wood Elves' diversified racial skills reflect their woodland affinity, improved archery, base stamina, stamina recovery, stealth detection, movement speed, reduced fall damage, and poison and disease resistance make them deadly foes and gifted hunters." And that description is actually missing a couple of passive bonuses, so let's dive in a little bit further here. Acrobat is the flavor passives for Wood Elves. These haven't changed at all. This still increases your experience gain with the bow skill line by 15%, plus you get the decreased fall damage taken by 10%. When we see Hunter's Eye, though, this did get changed quite a lot, in fact. Now, the second part here increases your movement speed by 5% and your physical and spell penetration. This previously required you to roll dodge to activate that. It was like a specific buff that you got on your character after roll dodging. Now this is just built into your character all the time. So I kind of like how they adjusted this. Though do keep in mind the values here got reduced, almost cut in half actually. So the increased movement speed by 5%, not very noticeable. It used to be 10%, so you might see some slowdown on your Wood Elf. You also have reduced physical and spell penetration. That used to be about 1,500, now it's closer to 1,000. But again, you don't have to do anything to get those bonuses, so it is kind of nice in that way. The stealth detection radius is still 3 meters. That has not changed. The endurance passive, still an amazing passive, especially if you are a stamina build. Obviously, that increased stamina recovery can go up even higher with some self buffs. And then resist affliction did get changed too. Make sure you don't miss this. So you used to be immune to the poisoned status effect, no longer. Now you get poison resistance and disease resistance increased by 2310, and you still have the 2000 max stamina. And finally, for the Aldmeri Dominion, we have the Khajiit. The racial skills of the feline Khajiit reflect their natural versatility and guile, giving them bonuses to pickpocketing, stealth, resource recovery, as well as base health, magicka, and stamina. These bonuses help them thrive in many ventures of life. So for the passives here, we're going to see they're essentially the same, though with some increased value. Starting off with our first passive, Cut Purse. This really didn't change. You still get the medium armor skill line increase and the chance to successfully pickpocket by 5%. Robustness is the same as well. You still get all the recoveries, health, magicka, and stamina recovery. The Lunar Blessing passive did get buffed a little bit here. Your max health, magicka, and stamina are now increased by over 900. And Feline Ambush did get a slight buff as well. You now increase your critical damage and critical healing by 12%, which is actually pretty strong. And then the stealth detection radius is the same as ever. Next up, we have the races of the Daggerfall Covenant. That includes the Orc, Breton, and Redguard. The racial skills of the Orcs reflect their native harsh mountain environment, giving them bonuses to heavy armor use, sprinting, weapon and spell damage, inspiration gain, weapon proficiency, as well as base health and stamina. And you might notice something extra has been added to the Orcs. Let's check out the passives. All right, starting off with the Craftsman passive, nothing has changed here. You still get the increased experience gain for the heavy armor skill line, as well as increased crafting inspiration. This means your crafting skills level up 10% faster, which is actually pretty good if you're interested in crafting. Brawny, this used to give us actually 2,000 max stamina. That did get cut this patch down to 1,000, so that's something to watch out for if you have an Orc. Though the max health is still there, so that is good. You still get 1,000 max health from the Unflinching Rage passive. You also get more healing now, which is actually pretty nice. Over 2,000 heal once every 4 seconds, and this can now occur on any type of damage, not just weapon skills or like light or heavy attacks, so that is kind of nice. And then the interesting change that we noted earlier, Swift Warrior now gives you weapon and spell damage. You still get the sprint cost reduction and the increased movement speed. So Orcs can be casters now. Yeah, technically, though you don't have any other magicka bonuses still on the Orc. Moving right along to the Breton race. The racial skills of the Breton reflect their affinity for the arcane, increasing their base magicka recovery, light armor, alliance gold gain, spell resistance, and cost reduction of spells, allowing them to cast spells with little pause. Let's check out the passive next. First, we have the Opportunist passive. This increases your experience gain with the light armor skill line by 15%, and you also increase your alliance points gained by 1%. Gift of Magnus, this still gives you lots of max magicka, 2,000 overall. The Spell Attunement passive, this did get adjusted just slightly. You still get the increased spell resistance. This effect is doubled if you're afflicted with burned, chilled, or concussed. And you now increase your magicka recovery by 130. That used to be just 100, I believe. And magicka mastery is still the same. You get a very nice cost reduction passive here, reducing the magicka cost of your abilities by 7%. Last up for the Daggerfall Covenant, we've got the Redguard. The racial skills of the Redguards reflect their ancestral legacy as sword masters, giving them bonus to shields, base stamina, stamina recovery, movement, and duration of effects from food. Their ability to flow in martial combat is unparalleled. When we look at the passives, we'll see that most of these have stayed the same, though there is one really nice buff out of all of these. First, for the flavor passive of the Redguards, we've got the Wayfarer passive. This increases experience gained with the One Hand and Shield skill line by 15%. This also increases your food buff timer by 15 minutes. Next up, the Martial Training passive reduces the cost of your weapon abilities by 8% and reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%. Conditioning, this is the same as before, 2,000 max stamina. And finally, the Adrenaline Rush passive did get a nice buff here. Not only do you get more stamina restored here, 1,005 stamina, but this happens whenever you deal damage. Previously, it had to be direct damage specifically, so the change here is actually nice and should help make sure you have this proc every 5 seconds. And that brings us to our final faction, the Ebonheart Pact, which includes Nords, Argonians, and Dark Elves. The racial skills of the Nords reflect their strong and hardy natures, giving them bonuses to two-handed weapon use, duration of effects from drinks, physical, spell, and frost resistance, ultimate generation, as well as base, health, and stamina. No additional effects were added to Nords here this year, but we did see some changes in terms of those values. Let's check out the passives here in detail. Starting with the Reveler passive, this increases your experience gain with the two-handed skill line by 15%. It also increases the duration of your drinks by 15 minutes. Then we have Resist Frost. This increases your max health by 1,000 and now increases your frost resistance by 4620. This did change where before it used to give you immunity to the chilled status effect. No longer, that just gives you a lot of frost resistance. Stalwart has remained the same, though it does increase your max stamina still by 1500. Gives you 5 ultimate every 10 seconds, which is a really good passive. And then Rugged, this did get altered. The resistance here got cut down. It was almost 4,000. It is now 2,600 for both physical and spell resist. So that is something to keep in mind if you main a Nord. Next up, we've got the Argonian race. Argonian racial skills reflect their people's perilous swamp environment, giving bonuses to healing done, restoration staves, disease and poison resistance, resources gained from consuming potions, swimming speed plus base health, magicka, and stamina. You may notice a couple new additions in there, so let's go over the passives next. First, we have the Amphibian passive. This hasn't changed at all. It still gives you the Restoration Staff skill increased by 15%, and then your bonus swimming speed, that's increased by 50%. Lifebender, this still increases your healing done by 6%. Argonian resistance did change a little bit. You still get the max health here, but you now get disease and poison resistance increased by 2310. That's very similar to how the Wood Elf passive works, and notice that you don't get immunity from the status effect anymore either. Finally, the Resourceful passive kind of got a buff and a nerf at the same time. First off, you do get max stamina now in addition to the max magicka, so maybe Argonians for hybrids, that might work well. But on the negative, you now get less resources from your potions. That used to be 4,000 health, magicka, and stamina. That is now down to 3,125, so just keep that in mind. Our last Ebonheart Pact race is going to be the Dark Elf. The racial skills of the Dark Elves reflect their intellect and agility, giving them bonuses in dual wielding, flame and lava resistance, weapon and spell damage, and base magicka and stamina. These bonuses allow them to adapt to anything, and that's still pretty much true. There are very few changes made to the Dark Elf passives, and those that were made were actually kind of buffs, I think. Let's take a look. So starting with the Ashlander passive, you still increase your experience gained with the dual wield skill line by 15%. You also reduce damage taken from environmental lava by 50%. The dynamic passive got a slight increase this year with increases to max magicka and max stamina by 1910, almost 2,000 there, so that's a very strong passive overall. Resist Flame did get changed slightly. We now have 4620 flame resistance. That's going to be in place of immunity to the burning status effect, so keep that in mind. And then the Ruination passive is still the same, still great. 258 weapon and spell damage, making Dark Elves great choices for stamina or magicka builds. Cannot go wrong either way on the Dark Elf. Now, the final race available in the Elder Scrolls Online is going to be the Imperial. This race is purchased through the Crown Store, so not everybody has access to it in the base game. And it's important to note also that this race is not tied to any faction. You can actually select any of the 3 factions that you want when you make an Imperial. Now, the racial skills of Imperials reflect their combat training and perseverance in battle, giving them bonuses to gold drop rates, shield proficiency, base health and stamina, and cost reduction of abilities, making them resolute fighters. And Imperials actually did get one very nice buff, so let's take a look at those passive skills. Starting with the Diplomat passive, this increases your experience gained with the One Hand and Shield skill line by 15%. It also increases your gold gained by 1%. The Tough passive has not changed. This still increases your max health by 2,000. Imperial Medal, this increases your max stamina by 2,000. Now the Red Diamond is where we did see a change. This used to only be a 3% cost reduction, plus a little bit of resource return on your direct damage. Now you get a flat 6% cost reduction, and to me, that is a huge buff for Imperials. This is going to be a great choice, you guys, all around for tanks, maybe even healers and solo builds, so definitely check out the Imperials. So now that you know every single race passive in the game, let's talk a little bit more about how each race fits into roles like tanks, healer, DPS, and even solo builds. For tanks, I don't see much changing here. Yes, Nords did lose some armor, but armor has a capped value in ESO anyway, and you'll likely be near the cap if you're speccing as a tank. Of course, you still have the health, the stamina, the ultimate generation, making Nords a great option for tanks overall. That being said, I think some other races now are a little bit better options than they were in the past. We just talked about Imperials getting that big boost to cost reduction, for example. Also, Argonians now have that extra 1,000 stamina, which they never had before. That's looking good as well. If you're interested in playing a healer, I think Argonian is still a great option. I'm not as concerned about the loss of resources from the potion passive on Argonians because there's many more options for sustain in the Elder Scrolls Online. And now the extra stamina that Argonians have makes them more durable. They're actually going to be a strong option for both PvE and PvP content because of that, I think. Of course, you still have High Elf, Dark Elf, Breton, those being good options as well due to Magicka sustain and recovery that some of those races have, as well as, the pure spell damage and max Magicka. Khajiit, I think, is also well worth looking at thanks to the crit healing passive that race has access to. Now, in terms of DPS builds, I think the biggest change we're going to see this year is that absolute domination of Orcs for stamina DPS taking a back seat maybe to Dark Elf or Khajiit. And I think Orcs will be in an okay place overall, but that loss of the max stamina going from 2,000 down to 1,000, that's going to hurt. Plus, think about the additional health, which used to be so nice on the Orc. That's really not important anymore because every character now has a lot more additional base health. I'm talking about almost 20k without even needing a food buff, for example. Now, Magicka builds will, of course, still benefit from being a High Elf or a Dark Elf, with Khajiit and Breton being solid choices as well. And finally, if you're interested in solo builds or more unique gameplay styles like maybe a hybrid build, then the race passive changes that we're getting this year are actually really exciting. Hybrid builds on Orcs, High Elves, Khajiits, Dark Elves, and now even Argonians to an extent are going to be stronger than ever. Nords are still going to be a strong choice for soloing as well due to those extra stats that they still have, the ultimate generation, and I think Imperials are looking quite nice as well. So with that said, that's going to wrap up our guide on the 10 races of the Elder Scrolls Online, now updated for 2021. If you enjoyed the video today or you found it informative, don't forget to crush that like button. Make sure you're subscribed right here for many more ESO guides just like this one. And as usual, I'm curious what you think. Let us know in the comment section down below what you think of the race changes overall and if you'll be making any changes to your builds this year. If you are making changes, make sure to check out the link in the description below or the pinned comment. I'll have a written guide with all the up-to-date racial passives over on my website, hacktheminotaur.com, so you can check all those out in detail and make the best decision for you and your build. As usual, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.